talking with Jordan. I love how he talked about him getting into the game with his fiance, that it was just their love of.
I love playing with my partner, something that you can spend
They
time
told me you were
together
one of
doing,
one.
The whole family. Disney Lorcana is definitely that for me.
Oh,
To hear somebody else having a similar experience.
and you're sleeping.
Love to see families that are playing together.
Running back to Richmond.
Welcome back to Quest for 2. So just to let you in on a little secret, when I first started this channel, there were 2 videos I wanted to make that I thought these were the magnum opus of the channel. Once I make them, it's done. There's nothing more left to say. The first video is a grand unified theory of how to ink your cards. The second video is about the Emerald-Sapphire mirror. Well, what do you know? Because of the DLC Richmond finals that happened about last weekend or 2 weeks ago, depending when you watch this video, I now have an excuse to talk about exactly that. So that's one off the bucket list. In this finals between Fungus and Sky, both playing the Emerald-Sapphire ramp deck. Now, I love the Emerald-Sapphire mirror. I think it's one of the more skill-expressive mirror matches that exist, especially in Core Constructed currently. So in today's Improving Technical Play, we're going to talk about all 5 games that they played in the finals. Now, because it's all 5 games and I don't want this video to be like 2 hours long, I mean the gameplay footage is like 2.5 hours, I cannot go through every single decision. I'm only going to talk about the ones that are important. I've already watched through the games once or twice, each of them, and made a whole bunch of notes. So yeah, I'm going to do my best to give you the story of the DLC Richmond finals as a whole, unpacking, as many of the key decisions as I can. So without further ado, let's kick off this improving technical play of the DLC Richmond finals between Fungus and Sky, the Emerald-Sapphire mirror, by doing as we always do, going to the deck lists. So as mentioned, it's an Emerald-Sapphire mirror. Both players are playing the same deck. In fact, they're playing almost identically the same deck. Their card lists only differ by 1. Fungus is playing 4 John Silver and 2 Improvise, whereas Sky is playing 3 John Silver and 3 Improvise. As to how the deck plays, we've discussed this before in a prior Improving Technical Play. I believe it was the Wakefield CCQ video, but just a quick recap: you aim to ramp early, use Clarabelle to refill your hand while removing characters from your opposing side by playing Mother Knows Best and your welcomes, and your kind of end game is clearing their board using the Prince Philip MMS combo. What is of note is that neither players are playing any copies of Hades' Infernal Schemer, probably a meta call because they didn't think they needed it against, say, Purple Steel. But specifically in this matchup, it's quite a big impact not having Hades. If your opponent lands an early Clarabelle or is able to Philip combo clear the board, Hades is a good way to bail out and at least equalize or stabilize on board with just a single card. Whereas without Hades, you're kind of forced to do multiple things in one turn to respond to a threat. For example, play Clarabelle and your welcome together because just playing your welcome on an opposing character without any follow-up is quite weak, or to go for the Philip MMS combo or trade something into their character and just play Philip 9. One of the most important cards in this matchup is the one-off Bend to My Will that both players are playing. Typically after the player who's on the play lands a Clarabelle and you welcome something, draws up to 6-7 cards in hand, then they're looking to try and Mother Knows Best a character and Bend to My Will, or you're welcome and Bend to My Will the opponent, if they're able to find that one-off copy. Typically how Sapphire Emerald mirrors tend to go is that both players are racing to land the first Clarabelle together with a Mother Knows Best or You're Welcome, following which the player who did that is going to try and find a Bend to My Will, whereas the opposing player will try and equalize back on cards with their own Clarabelle shift plus Mother Knows Best or You're Welcome, or perhaps set up a Philip 3 so that they can shift into the Philip 9 with the MMS combo to at least restore board parity. If neither player straight up loses the game in the first 7 to 8 turns by losing all their cards in the hand or having 0 resources, then the game becomes a bit of a slog where both players are just flipping cards over, hopefully drawing them in the correct order where they can assemble either a Clarabelle combo or a Bound Something Bend to My Will combo or the Philip MMS combo. It is a matchup where truly all 3 resources are very important. The number of cards in your hand, sometimes you want them high, sometimes you want them low. The number of ink that you tend to want to have an ink advantage over your opponent, and also to maintain a board lead but also not be wide enough such that you just get blown out by a Prince Philip MMS combo. This matchup is fairly intricate, particularly because most of the things that your opponent wants to do in the mirror have to be set up 1 turn in advance, so you know what's coming or you know what they're attempting to project they're going to do, and you have to think about whether you want to play around it or play into it or ignore it completely. It's fairly hard to discuss these details without at least looking at the games, so without further ado, let's go into game 1. So in game 1, Sky goes first. When you're going first, you want to go for shifting in the Clarabelle as early as you can, backed up with preferably a You're Welcome or also a Mother Knows Best, of course turn 2 ramp and maybe Cinderella. Consistent with this, Sky keeps a Clarabelle Clumsy Guess and a Tipo and alters away the other 5 cards. On Fungus's end, he keeps a Tipo, a Cinderella and a Clarabelle, but interestingly he chose not to keep a Develop Your Brain even though it's something he can play on turn 1. From a probability perspective, you're more likely to find any given card you're looking for by playing a Develop Your Brain on turn 1 than trying to alter a Develop Your Brain to find that single card, because you get 2 looks of your shuffled deck instead of 1 look at a deck that's less a Develop Your Brain. So therefore the only logical reason he would do this is because he wants to play Clarabelle Clumsy Guess on turn 1 instead, but to do that he needs to find it, so he throws away the Develop Your Brain. Makes sense, logical, albeit slightly risky, high rolly. So we'll kick the game off in a bit of hyperspeed to go through the early turns. Sky has the Clarabelle Clumsy Guess on turn 1. It's not the best thing to play on turn 1 in most matchups, but specifically in the mirror it's really good because the opposing deck tends to have difficulty removing an early Clarabelle Clumsy Guess. We see that he has a Tipo on turn 2, we see that Fungus also has a Tipo on turn 2, and now we're going to slow down the game because it gets to turn 4 where things get a bit more interesting. And that's because Sky doesn't have a turn 4 play. He just inks his Prince Philip 9, quests with his Tipo and passes. Means he doesn't have Cinderella, doesn't have Donald Duck. He might have You're Welcome, but he wants to save it for after he shifts in his Clarabelle the following turn, or he could be tight on ink. Typically the player on the play has a big advantage in the mirror, but because Sky missed his play on 4 ink, no Donald Duck, no Cinderella, that's one way that Fungus can assert a board position in this game. And he clearly does so by playing a Cinderella and inking a Sail the Azurite Sea, following which he'll get to have an extra ink, which means that he will have the ink advantage over his opponent. On Sky's turn 4, he manages to pull off the Shift Clarabelle Sing You're Welcome onto the Cinderella, which nets him 5 cards. Obviously this puts him ahead, but there are many ways for Fungus to catch back up, so we need to see how he reacts on his turn before we can truly assess who's ahead and who's behind this game. Fungus's turn 5, the best he can do is to play and shift in his own Clarabelle, which would net him 2 cards at the end of his turn. Obviously this is not ideal for Fungus. If Sky has either Mother Knows Best or You're Welcome to return that Clarabelle shift back to Fungus's hand by singing with Clarabelle while playing another 4-drop or another bunch of cards, then Fungus is very well and truly far behind. Unfortunately for Sky, the best he can do is ink up to 6 with a John Silver and shift in a second Clarabelle. While he gets to draw a couple of cards at the end of his turn, he's in an extremely precarious position because he can't remove Fungus's Clarabelle. Fungus can use that Clarabelle to sing Mother Knows Best or You're Welcome to remove one of the Clarabelles, and perhaps remove the other using another copy of the aforementioned songs, or perhaps a Basil. If both of those things happen, Sky's in an incredibly bad position because he has no characters on board that can sing any of the high impact songs that can remove Fungus's Clarabelle, and more importantly, Fungus draws 1,000,000 cards, which gives him the opportunity to shut the door on the game by drawing Bend to My Will. On Fungus's turn, we can see he has precisely that. He inks a silver, plays a Basil to bounce one of the Clarabelles back to hand, and sing You're Welcome with his Clarabelle to return the Sky's Clarabelle back to deck. He ends the turn with a commanding board lead and drawing 6 additional cards to go with what looks like 4 of his additional cards in hand. So he's super far ahead. If he can land a Bend to My Will next turn while removing any of Sky's characters, that's pretty much the end of the game. From this position, what Sky has to do to get back into this game is to start inking aggressively, maybe with Sail or with Cinderella, and set up a Prince Philip 3 so that he can threaten a combo next turn and hope that Fungus doesn't have the Bend to My Will. He starts off with a Sail, so good start, plays a second Sail, inks a bunch of cards including a Prince Philip 3 and plays a Cinderella, which will give him 1 more ink at the end of the turn. He also plays a Clarabelle 1. From what it looks like, he's just trying to dump cards out of his hand so that Fungus's Clarabelle doesn't get out of hand, and also get as much ink on board as possible so that he can get closer to 12, where you can do Malicious, Mean and Scary and Prince Philip 9 together without needing a singer. He then decides to quest with his Tipo, which I find slightly odd, but the reason I will explain why later on Fungus's turn. He ends his turn on 10 ink and also has a Clara 1 on board to threaten a Clarabelle shift next turn if that is something that Fungus needs to play around. Fungus starts his turn by playing an Improvise on his Tipo, drawing a card and using the Tipo to challenge and take out Sky's Tipo. And this is why I thought it was a bit of bad quest by Sky, because having a Tipo or any junky characters on board is one of the easy ways to get damage onto Fungus's big characters when he quests out with them, so that you can take out those bigger characters using a top decked Prince Philip 9 without needing the malicious mean and scary. Now that option is denied, and on the flip side, the one law wasn't going to make a difference in this game. Anyway, Sky sings You're Welcome using his Clarabelle onto Sky's Clarabelle 1. He sings Mother Knows Best with his Basil to return the Cinderella back to hand, and of course he has the Bend to My Will, which basically shuts the door on the game completely. The only draw that Sky has to get back into this game is a Clarabelle 7 on his turn, but unfortunately he discarded 2 of them. He doesn't draw it, but instead he draws a Basil, which he uses to bounce Fungus's Clarabelle back to hand to at least delay the game out for, a few more turns. Being so far up ahead in this game at this point, Fungus is at the conversion part where he just plays as many things as possible on board to get as much lore in as quickly as possible. He even gets to play John Silver to give Basil Reckless so that the Basil can't even quest to make Fungus discard a card from his hand. And after playing a bunch of things, he passes the turn to Sky. Sky draws an Improvise, allows him to draw one more card deeper in his deck. And it turns out he drew a pretty good one in the Donald Duck, which will allow him to draw hopefully 2 cards every turn if Fungus is unable to remove it, though that at this point seems increasingly unlikely given the amount of resources that Fungus has. On Fungus's turn, he quests with his John Silver to give the Basil Reckless yet again, and he gets to hardcast a Mother Knows Best to return the Donald Duck back to hand and quest with the Basil to force Sky to discard it. So, problem solved. Thereafter, he plays a Clarabelle just to add more lore to the board and just quests out with his characters, because at this point it's just about ending the game as fast as possible. On Sky's turn, he draws a Vision of the Future, plays it. He really wants to find a Clarabelle 7, but he doesn't find it, so he takes a Develop Your Brain, plays it, and unfortunately sees a Philip 3 and a John Silver at the top of his deck, neither of which really do anything at this point. And because, at this point it's just a losing battle, he decides to just scoop up his cards, and that's game 1 going to Fungus. So Sky lost despite going first, which is unusual. It's not anything he really done that led to this. He missed his 4 drop, which is unfortunate, but what really punished him was despite drawing 6 cards off of his Clarabelle Shift on 5 ink, he was unable to find an answer to remove Fungus's Clarabelle. Perhaps if his 4 drop was Cinderella, he may have been able to find one of the Mother Knows Best or Your Welcome's 2 cards down, or it would have also unlocked Basil 7 as a potential answer to the Clarabelle, because on the turn that he had to respond to the Clarabelle, he would have been on 7 ink. But small margins, you get unlucky. There's still 4 more games to go, maybe, so let's go on to game 2. So, the alters for game 2, both players throw some number of cards. I only want to talk about Fungus's alter. From his opening hand, he keeps a Cinderella, a Tipo, and a Sail. And I think that when you are on the draw, it is correct to keep both Tipo and Sail, because they're very good at dumping cards from your hand, especially after your opponent lands a Clarabelle, and because you are going to be on the draw, presumably your opponent is going to Clarabelle first before you, so you want to have that option. Further, if his alter yields the full MMS combo, so Malicious Mean and Scary, Prince Philip 3 and Prince Philip 9, he could Tipo away the Cinderella on turn 2, play Sail on turn 3, ink twice and play Philip 3, allowing him to have the MMS combo set up for the following turn in the event the opponent does something good like play a Clarabelle. In any event, the either card is also inkable, so you can always decide not to do that if you don't want to. Alright, so we're off to the races. On turn 1, where Sky goes first, he inks a Silver, plays a Develop Your Brain, takes a card, can't see what it is so it doesn't really matter, and passes. Fungus's turn 1, he inks a Donald Duck and passes the turn. On Sky's turn 2, we get a pretty good look at his hand. It's a Clarabelle 1, 2 Tipos, a Donald Duck, 2 Cinderellas, and a Mother Knows Best. So obviously we're going to be inking twice this turn, one naturally and one through Tipo. But what are you going to ink? If it were me, I would ink a Tipo and put into the inkwell the Donald Duck, because I personally like having double Cinderella draws. On the play, it accelerates me to Clarabelle 7 without necessarily needing the Clarabelle 1 on turn 5, and also it enables a Prince Philip MMS combo if I do end up drawing those cards. Sky inks the Tipo as discussed and of course plays the Tipo, but interestingly he decides to bottom a Cinderella instead, which I find slightly odd. I'm not sure if it's a personal preference thing of liking Donald Duck over Cinderella, but I think having 2 Cinderellas is just super strong. Because of the double Cinderella trigger when you play the second Cinderella with the first one on the board, because Fungus is not going to be able to remove the first one in the interim, you basically draw cards, right? You filter cards into your hand and you get cards into your inkwell for free. It's almost as good as landing an early Clarabelle, because you're setting up your Prince Philip combo, which is honestly what ends up winning this game, or setting up a character that can sing along with Bend to My Will. I think the ink lead in this matchup is super important, more important than the more consistent draw from Donald Duck, because of course Donald Duck, your opponent's also drawing cards and you're also able to do broken stuff on your turn. On Fungus's turn, he inks a Malicious, Mean and Scary, plays a Tipo, and looks at his hand that has 3 Cinderellas, which, you're unlikely to play all 3 this game. So eventually he decides to bottom one of them. On Sky's turn, he makes another curious decision, which is playing a Donald Duck over the Cinderella. I don't like this play at all, because firstly, if you draw a Clara 7 off the top, you aren't able to shift into it next turn because you only have 5 ink. If you play Cinderella, then you do, because you would have 6 ink. Secondly, you prevent yourself from playing Cinderella into another Cinderella the next turn, should you draw it, which, as I mentioned, is super strong. I suppose he already prevented it himself by inking one of the Cinderellas with his Tipo, and the fact that he did so suggests that he doesn't value this line, but, well, then in that case I disagree with it. I suppose if he plays Donald this turn and he plays Cinderella next turn, he draws one more card before deciding what to ink under the Cinderella, so he has a bit more optionality. And in both cases, you would be able to reach 7 ink on the same turn anyway, which will enable your Clarabelle or your Basil play. I don't know, this line doesn't make a lot of sense to me. If anyone watching this understands it, I would be so happy if you explain it, because it's not how I would play this turn, and I would really like to learn. I mean, Sky has to be a very strong player. He's in the finals of this tournament after all. It's like 3,000 players or something. So yeah, happy to learn, happy to hear more, but my opinion currently, I disagree with this line almost completely. I even disagree with dumping the other Cinderella to Tipo the previous turn. Moving right along to Fungus's turn, he inks a Sail the Azurite Sea, plays a Cinderella, and gets to ink one more card, which means that he will be at a 6 ink threshold, and he will be able to shift in a Clarabelle and sing with that Cinderella a You're Welcome or a Mother Knows Best onto Sky's characters the following turn. That's why the ink lead is very important in this matchup. Over to Sky, he plays the Cinderella as discussed, as well as sets up the Clarabelle 1 to threaten a potential Clarabelle 7 shift. Though since he will go up to 7 ink next turn anyway, it's more likely he's just dumping a card from his hand in case Fungus has the Clarabelle on his turn. He then quests with his Tipo and passes. On Fungus's turn, we can see he has the Clarabelle shift lying in his hand, but he decides not to play it because likely there's too many possible singers on the opposing side of the board. Instead, he opts to ink the Donald Duck and play a second Cinderella, which will net him 2 more ink and 2 more looks at the top card of his deck. It looks to me like he's baiting Sky to shift in or play the Clarabelle on his side first, and if he has a You're Welcome or Mother Knows Best, he's forced to do it on a Cinderella rather than on Fungus's own Clarabelle 7, which he will only play on his following turn and then sing the You're Welcome or Mother Knows Best on the opposing Clarabelle, which would be significantly more impactful. Interestingly, at his end of turn Cinderella triggers, he resolves one and he chooses not to resolve the second, which means that his hand of 3 cards there is stacked. He has everything he needs right now. Sky needs to play very carefully. Unfortunately, on Sky's turn, it's pretty obvious he didn't manage to find a Clarabelle, because he quests with his Tipo and he sings You're Welcome with Cinderella to shuffle the Tipo back into his deck just to try and find 2 more cards to find something good to do this turn. After that, he plays Vision of the Future, looks at 5 cards and takes 1, inks a Tipo and shifts in a Clarabelle, which I assume is what he took off of the Vision of the Future, and finally sings Mother Knows Best with his Donald Duck to return the Clarabelle 1 to Fungus's hand. All in all, not a terrible turn, it could have gone way worse. He manages to end his turn by drawing 3 cards off of the Clarabelle. On Fungus's turn, he shows off the nutty hand that he was holding on to. He inks a Clarabelle, shifts in a Clarabelle 7, plays a Tipo, sings You're Welcome with Cinderella to shuffle Sky's Clarabelle back into his deck, and sings a second You're Welcome with his Cinderella onto the Donald Duck to remove it. And he caps off the turn by questing with a Tipo. He's gonna end up drawing like a million cards at the end of the turn, and he has a great board, but you must also keep in mind that Sky still has a singer on the board, which is able to sing, You're Welcome or Mother Knows Best onto the Clarabelle and play a Bend to My Will on his turn if he has it, which should put him right back into the game, probably ahead. That's why this matchup's so fantastic. There's so many things you have to consider when you play. You can't play around everything, so you do what you can to manage the risk on as to the possible threats that your opponent is able to present. For Sky's turn, he leads off with a Sail the Azurite Sea, inks a Clarabelle, plays a Philip 3, intimating that he may have the Prince Philip combo in his hand, which he likely does because he has quite a lot of cards, and he plays a Tipo, inking something else. He uses his second ink to ink another Clarabelle 1 to play a Clarabelle 1, and takes a couple of trades or quests with his characters, not really worth talking about, because on Fungus's turn, he sings Malicious, Mean and Scary and presents the Prince Philip combo, wiping Sky's board and putting him significantly ahead. He quests out here, again now we are in the conversion part of the game for Fungus. Now on Sky's turn, he's on 10 ink, so he's 2 turns away from the Prince Philip MMS combo, and he has the Prince Philip 9 in hand, so he really needs to ink and set up this combo because that's his only way back into the game. He plays a Vision of the Future, looks at the 5 cards, it doesn't contain a Malicious, Mean and Scary, but it does contain another Vision of the Future, so that's why he eventually decides to take. He plays it, and then looks at another 5 cards and it still doesn't have the Malicious, Mean and Scary, and in fact has a whole bunch of 7 drops that now are going to be at the bottom of his deck unless it gets shuffled with You're Welcome. From the 5 he takes what appears to be a Clarabelle 7 into his hand, inks a Basil and then plays the Clarabelle, passing his turn, which I believe lets him draw 2 cards, giving him 2 more chances plus the draw step on his turn to try and find the Malicious, Mean and Scary. Oh sorry, no, he draws 4 cards. Oops! On Fungus's turn, he probably can smell the Malicious, Mean and Scary combo coming up, and Sky's gonna have enough ink to just do it without needing a character in play, so he shouldn't commit any more to the board. He plays Sail the Azurite Sea and Vision of the Future, then plays a Sail the Azurite Sea, plays another Vision of the Future, inks 3 Clarabelle 1s to play a Donald Duck that likely he basically never wants to play this game, so he doesn't mind if it gets board wiped out by a Prince Philip, and he plays Mother Knows Best to return the Clarabelle back to Sky's hand for good measure to at least maintain board control and force Sky to have the Malicious, Mean and Scary combo. He then quests out with his characters and passes the turn. On Sky's turn, it turns out he has it, Malicious, Mean and Scary into Prince Philip inking a Clarabelle 7 to get up to 12 ink, and then he passes his turn back to Fungus. On Fungus's turn, he leads with another Vision of the Future. I think it's like his 3rd or 4th one he's played this game already. He then exerts 7 ink and then he plays a Bend to My Will, which makes Sky discard his hand. It's unfortunate he didn't manage to find a Mother Knows Best or a You're Welcome from, earlier in the game or from the earlier Vision of the Future, because he has 4 ink left, which leaves the Prince Philip 9 standing, but he's still in a commanding position because he has a lot of resources left in his hand to deploy. He caps off his turn by playing a Tipo and playing a Develop Your Brain. On Sky's turn, for the 2nd game running, he draws the Donald Duck after getting Bent to My Will and quests for 3 because that's all he can do. Now he has to hope that this Prince Philip 9 can quest for a few more and put enough law pressure, because if not, he has nothing else going for him. Unfortunately, that's not the case because Fungus has the Prince Philip MMS combo to take out both of Sky's characters. He inks a You're Welcome, quests with his Tipo and passes. On Sky's turn, he draws, shows the Cinderella and concedes game 2. He's not yet going to lose, but by drawing a Cinderella that does essentially nothing, that's going to give Fungus the 2 turns he needs to quest with his Prince Philip and essentially end the game. Not to mention, he can also just play more stuff next turn. In my opinion, this game 2 was won by the filtering and inking advantage granted by Fungus's 2 Cinderellas that he played back to back. Because he was on the draw and Sky didn't choose to go for double Cinderella, it gave Fungus the ability to have more ink and see more cards than Sky without spending ink to find the pieces he needed to do, for example, the Clarabelle Double You're Welcome and subsequently the Prince Philip MMS. If Sky had gone for the double Cinderella line instead of Donald Duck into Cinderella, perhaps the game might have played out differently, we'll never know. But anyway, now let's go on to game 3 with Sky's back against the wall 2 games down. He has to win the next one to keep the series going. Before I continue with this video, I would like to make a suggestion that if you do like this type of content and would like to see similar sort of videos in the future, if you would like and subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you for your service. For the alters for game 3, Sky, who's going first, keeps a Clarabelle 1, a Tipo and a Develop Your Brain. Looks good. For Fungus, he keeps 2 cards, Sail, the Azurite Sea and Develop Your Brain. Interestingly, he had Philip 3 and Philip 9 in his opening hand but chose to dump them. Typically, Philip 3 and Philip 9 are pretty good on the draw even in the mirror match, so I think this might be a matter of alter priority. He would rather look for Cinderella to play on turn 3 rather than keep the 2 cards that would be good if he had the Cinderella. Turn 1, Sky inks a John Silver, plays a Develop Your Brain and passes. And Fungus responds in kind, inking a Prince Philip 9. On Sky's turn 2, we get to see his hand: a Clarabelle 1, Clarabelle 7, Donald Duck, Cinderella, Tipo, You're Welcome, and Prince Philip 9. So it's pretty stacked, it's almost a nut draw. Except for one problem, his ramp on turn 2 is Tipo and not Sail. This means that if he goes for the turn 2 Tipo inking something into Cinderella, turn 3 inking 2 things with the aim of shifting Clarabelle on the following turn, he won't have enough cards to keep the You're Welcome in his hand, which would make the draw much weaker. Instead, he goes for a different line. He decides to put into his Inkwell Clarabelle 1 instead. So what this tells me is that he plans to play Donald Duck next turn, followed by a Cinderella on the following turn with the aim of having 2 4-drops that can sing You're Welcome on the turn that he gets to play a Clarabelle, and with this line he gets to keep the You're Welcome in his hand. Given how important singing You're Welcome is in this mirror match where neither player has that much removal, they don't have Hades for example, I think this is definitely the correct play, and it shows very high level thinking from Sky in knowing how to plan out his future turns. On Fungus's turn, he inks a Develop Your Brain, plays a Tipo, jokes that he's gonna pass the turn, but of course he inks something extra, passes back to Sky. On Sky's turn, he inks a Clarabelle 7, likely an extra one that he drew, plays a Donald Duck as discussed, quests with his Tipo, and passes over to Fungus. On Fungus's turn 3, he gets the perfect play of inking the Donald Duck and playing Cinderella, adding additional card into his Inkwell. On Sky's turn, he's probably gonna play Cinderella, but since he has a spare ink for the turn, he starts with a Develop Your Brain, inks another Philip 9, plays the Cinderella as discussed, quests with his Tipo, and adds a card to his Inkwell at the end of his turn using Cinderella's effect. He's all set up for the Clarabelle next turn, likely having kept You're Welcome in his hand up to this point. Back over to Fungus, and he knows what's going to happen next turn is pretty much the one thing that Sky's been setting up, and it's the worst thing that can happen to him, which is the Clarabelle with a You're Welcome or Mother Knows Best, maybe both because he has 2 singers. So what does he do to mitigate the effect of this? He plays a Sail, he plays a second Sail, inks 2 cards and plays the Prince Philip 3 before the Clarabelle comes down on Sky's turn, which intimates that he may have already or would likely draw into the MMS Prince Philip's shift combo should Sky give him a You're Welcome. He ends the turn by inking a Clarabelle 7 because it's going to be too slow this game. Sky's board is already a bit too wide to be able to prevent Sky from doing anything disgusting on the turn after the Clarabelle turn that's coming right up. On Sky's turn, he inks a You're Welcome, plays a Clarabelle 7, sings a Mother Knows Best with a Cinderella to return Fungus's Cinderella back to hand, and then he quests with the Tipo and passes the turn. What this smells like to me is that his hand is going to be the MMS Prince Philip combo, because if that was not the case, you wouldn't be inking You're Welcome over there. Back to Fungus, and he shows he has it. He sings MMS with his Prince Philip 3 and hard casts a Prince Philip 9, quests with his Tipo, passes the turn. If he didn't have it this turn, he's probably done for this game, so now the game just goes on. Back to Sky, now it's for him to rebuild. So he leads off with a Donald Duck, inks a Clarabelle 1 to bring him to 8 ink and passes the turn. Again, it's fairly obvious he's holding the Prince Philip MMS combo in his hand. Back over to Fungus, it looks like he can't remove the Donald Duck, so he just plays a Cinderella, quests out his characters, triggers Cinderella, and passes the turn back to Sky. On Sky's turn, he inks a Sail and does the Prince Philip MMS combo that he's pretty much been holding in hand for like the past 3 turns. Now it's back over to Fungus to rebuild. He leads with a Vision of the Future, and he didn't look like he found anything good. He inks a Tipo, plays a John Silver, and passes. At this point, what he needs now is to re-MMS combo again, though I think he's down 3 Prince Philips already, so it's quite unlikely. And what Sky needs to do is wrap this game up by hopefully a Bend to My Will. On Sky's turn, he leads with a Develop Your Brain. And hey, guess what he has? The Bend to My Will, which makes Fungus discard his hand, which looks like he had already set up the Prince Philip combo, so very, very unfortunate. On the bright side for Fungus, at least he keeps this John Silver around because Sky didn't manage to find a Mother Knows Best or a You're Welcome, and also because Sky has a Donald Duck on the board, Fungus is able to draw 2 cards by the time it's his turn, so maybe he can kind of get some steam going. Sky caps off the turn by questing with his Donald Duck and passes back over to Fungus. Fungus plays a Prince Philip 3 for his turn, quests with his John Silver to give the Reckless to Prince Philip 9 on Sky's side. He doesn't want to take out the Donald Duck because he needs to draw cards, passes the turn back over to Sky. Sky takes out the John Silver using his Prince Philip 9, which puts 5 damage on it, so at least now it's exposed to a Malicious Me and Scary. But of course he doesn't let it happen. He plays a Basil to bounce his Prince Philip 9 back to his hand, plays a Tipo, quests with his Donald Duck, and passes the turn back over to Fungus. On Fungus's turn, he does end up having a pretty good turn. He plays a Basil to bounce Sky's Basil, and then he plays a Donald Duck, so at least he uses all of his ink. However, it looks like Sky has a Prince Philip 9 in his hand, and if he has Malicious, Mean and Scary, then that's pretty much the end of the game. And of course he does. He sinks Malicious, Mean and Scary with Donald Duck, plays the Prince Philip 9, quests with his Tipo, and passes the turn back over to Fungus, yet again with a massive board lead. It's now just about closing the game out. Oh, and he inks a Tipo, plays a Prince Philip 3 to speed the clock up more, and yeah, says go. On Fungus's turn, he gets to play Basil, bounce the Prince Philip 9 back to Sky's hand. He holds on to his last card, doesn't do anything with it. I think it's going to be like a You're Welcome or probably Malicious, Mean and Scary, but ultimately if he can't play it, means it's not that great. Sky's turn, he leads with an Improvise, spends 7 ink to bounce the Basil, and he quests out bringing his lore to 13, which basically ends the game because he's going to have, I think, can go up to 19 lore next turn, even if Fungus plays the Basil to bounce the Basil, because Sky still has the Prince Philip 9 in his hand that was earlier on bounced by Fungus's Basil. Regardless, Fungus soldiers on, he plays the Basil to bounce Sky's Basil, Basil, big bouncy Basil. Inks a Clarabelle 1, but I think ultimately at this point it doesn't really matter, passes the turn. Sky, as discussed, shifts in the Prince Philip 9 and quests out for lethal, taking the game 3, bringing it to a game 4. Sky took the game, playing well in the early turns, managing his resources and cards in hand to pull off the Clarabelle turn. I don't think Fungus did anything wrong either, he just got unlucky in that Sky managed to find the bend to my will on the perfect turn to basically shut the door in the game after he had the Prince Philip combo and Sky Prince Philip comboed him back. Sky's now on the board, so let's go on to game 4. For the alters for game 4, all you need to know is that Sky keeps a bunch of cards including a Tipo. Fungus looks at his opener, throws the 7, immediately draws 7. Yikes, he's trying to find the turn 2 ramp. Let's hope he found it. So let's zoom through turn 1. Fungus inks a silver, plays a Clarabelle, passes the turn. Sky is thinking on what to ink. It's still slow even though it's hyper speed. Come on buddy, you can do it. He inks to develop your brain and then eventually decides to play the Clarabelle as well. Good plays on both sides, this is a good card in the matchup. And unfortunately for Fungus, he doesn't manage to find turn 2 ramp. He inks the Improvise, plays a Vision of the Future, passes the turn back to Sky. Sky's turn, he inks a second Develop, plays a Sail, and inks a Basil, passing the turn back to Fungus. Fungus's turn 3, after some back and forth, he decides to start off with a Develop Your Brain, manages to find and play the Sail the Azurite Sea, inks the Vision of the Future and says go. So now he has possibly 5 ink next turn. It is possible for him to shift into Clarabelle, so even though the ramp came a little late, it's not the worst thing that could have happened. On Sky's turn, he has the best possible. He inks Sail the Azurite Sea, plays Cinderella, adds another card to his Inkwell, draws a card, passes the turn back to Fungus. On Fungus's turn, he inks a You're Welcome and plays a Philip 3, passing the turn back. I think this indicates he doesn't have Clarabelle 7 in hand. If not, this play doesn't really make a lot of sense, and he might be setting up a Prince Philip combo should Sky decide to go for his own Clarabelle shift into Mother Knows Best or You're Welcome. And hooray! For the first time this series, Sky decides to go for the double Cinderella play. So now he gets to do 2 Cinderella triggers at the end of his turn. He's deciding whether or not to ink for this turn, because you kind of don't have to. If you just do Cinderella twice, you're going to go up to 7 next turn anyway. But he decides to, he inks a Tipo, and he triggers one of the Cinderellas, but he doesn't trigger the other. So that means he's going to have 7 ink in play, I believe, and because he didn't trigger the other, it's likely because he doesn't have the Prince Philip combo, and he wants to hold on to the cards in his hand, which means that he has Clarabelle and You're Welcome for sure. But oh my goodness, Fungus has the MMS Prince Philip combo for his turn to kind of wipe out all of Sky's plans. Whoa, it's looking bad for Sky. He inks a Vision of the Future, plays a Clarabelle, passes the turn, doesn't draw any cards because they both have the same number of cards, I believe 2. Fungus's turn, he inks a You're Welcome, plays a Basil, bouncing the Clarabelle back and quests out. So by inking the You're Welcome there, it looks like he's not planning to set anything up. He's just going straight for the jugular here. Quest, hope this board sticks, win the game. I say that because an alternative line would have been to quest with the Clarabelle, sing You're Welcome with his Prince Philip onto the Clarabelle to at least see 2 more cards, and if one of them's inkable, he inks one, plays Basil with 1 more card in hand, but forget it, he says, let's just go for it. The best Sky can do for his turn is to just play a Clarabelle and pass the turn, again drawing no cards. He didn't ink, which smells like a MMS Prince Philip combo in hand, so Fungus needs to try and get rid of this Clarabelle to block the singer. He leads off with a Develop Your Brain, then plays a Vision of the Future, hoping to find, I don't know, Mother Knows Best probably, given the amount of ink that he has. Doesn't find it, takes a Develop Your Brain, plays it, sees a John Silver and a Prince Philip 9, and he's bricked. He kinda needs to think that this board's gonna get wiped. He takes one of them, quests with the Basil, hoping to discard something good. There's 3 cards in Sky's hand. 3 cards. They start shuffling. Bam! Discards a You're Welcome, which would have been good on the Clarabelle, but I think that's not what Fungus wants to discard. He wants to see one of the MMS Prince Philip pieces to protect this board. He inks the John Silver that he took for the turn and passes. Oh, after questing out of his characters, of course. Back over to Sky, we know he doesn't have the combo in hand probably, because if he did, he wouldn't be playing this Vision of the Future, which he just did. Inks a Prince Philip 3, plays a Basil, bounces the opposing Basil and sinks with his last card a You're Welcome on the Prince Philip, effectively wiping the board. I think the reason therefore why he didn't ink the previous turn was that he was protecting the 2 You're Welcomes in his hand with the spare card that he had, probably the Basil, or maybe all 3 of these cards are just good with the Clarabelle anyway, so he wants to set up a Clarabelle first and wait, see what happens. Since Fungus couldn't remove it, he got to have this big swing turn. After drawing 3 cards, he passes back over to Fungus, who bashes his Clarabelle into the Clarabelle 7 on Sky, and you know what's gonna be coming. He inks a Tipo and plays Prince Philip 9. Back over to Sky, he leads off with a Vision of the Future, sings a You're Welcome with his Basil onto the Philip 9, and of course the big finish is playing a Clarabelle 7 after inking a John Silver. Draws a couple of cards and passes the turn back over to Fungus. Fungus leads with a Sail and spends the rest of his ink on returning a Basil back to Sky's hand with a Basil. The game's now in this weird limbo state where neither player can set up a wide enough board to justify a Prince Philip 9 MMS combo from the opposing side, which means that the main card that both of them want at this point is Bend to My Will along with You're Welcome or Mother Knows Best or something like that. That's what both players are gunning for. Over to Sky, he leads with a Sail, inks twice, plays a Basil to return Fungus's Basil back to his hand, big bouncy Basils. Spends his remaining ink to play a Prince Philip 3, passes the turn. Now Fungus is in a weird spot where he doesn't have enough ink to Philip combo, he needs to ink up to it, but he also doesn't have enough cards in hand to ink up to it, so we shall see how he resolves this. He starts off his turn by playing a Basil again to return Sky's Basil back to his hand. Hard casts a Mother Knows Best onto the Clarabelle to return it back to Sky's hand. It's not a great play, I think he has nothing better to do, might as well tempo, but you know, it kind of goes down a card here, a resource that might have been useful should he have had his own Clarabelle so he can at least draw back a card. Back over to Sky, he inks a Basil, the Basil probably that was bounced 60 trillion times, and then he plays a Clarabelle 7 here, which means that he likely has a way to remove this Basil 7 that's on Fungus's side, and he does. He has the You're Welcome to shuffle it back. He's gonna get to draw a bunch of cards, 3, but Fungus also gets to draw 2 more from the You're Welcome. So, the cards have been spilled. That's a disaster. Thankfully, Fungus has this little Mickey Mouse hand that's able to protect his hand. Perfect. I mean, if not, the game would have been, called off or something. He'll get a gameplay warning, or maybe he wouldn't keep the hand that he had. Which leads me to this public service announcement to all players going out to play in tournaments out there. Have something on hand that's able to indicate clearly what is your hand so that it's separate from your ink, because both those categories of cards tend to be face down. So for example, Fungus had a little Mickey Mouse hand that's able to distinguish what is his hand away from his ink, and if he spilled cards on his hand like he did when he looked through his deck, then it wouldn't cause undue distress to himself, his opponent, and most importantly, the judges. So what I like to use is this White King from chess, because I'm a pretentious snob, but you can use whatever you want. Just don't use dice, because that's against the Lorcana tournament rules, because dice can be used to track extra information, and that's against the rules in Lorcana tournament play. So yeah, don't use dice, use something cool, and it might save your life like it did in Fungus's case here. Service announcement over, back to the game. And we're back to Sky's turn, where he quests with his Prince Philip 3 to add 2 more lore to the board and triggers the Clarabelle to draw 3 cards as discussed. Back on Fungus's turn, he spends 7 to play Basil, bouncing the Clarabelle back to Sky's hand. He inks a silver and then plays a Donald Duck, leaving him with 2 more cards in his hand, passing his turn. Sky's turn starts off with a Develop Your Brain, followed by a hard cast Mother Knows Best on the Donald Duck. And with 7 ink, he plays not the Clarabelle but a Bend to My Will to make Fungus discard his hand, which puts Sky firmly in the driver's seat, although because he doesn't have a lot of stuff on board currently, it's gonna take a few more turns to win and maybe Fungus is able to catch back up. Fungus also gets to hold on to that Basil for now, which is also pretty good. The game's not over. Sky quests out, passes the turn. This turn, he naturally quests with the Basil, which makes Sky discard a Clarabelle 7. He then just hard casts a Prince Philip 9, removing nothing, but good enough. It's a 3 lore quester, he has 5 lore on the board, and he's on 13 lore total, so he's threatening lethal over 2 turns, which kind of forces Sky to have to react to that Basil that's now exerted. Thankfully, Sky has almost the perfect response. He plays Improvise on his Prince Philip to draw a card and give it, importantly, the 1 strength, which then allows him to challenge into the Basil without needing him to throw another character like the Tipo into the Basil. He then plays his own Basil to return the Prince Philip back to Fungus's hand, quests out with his characters, and passes the turn. Importantly here, Fungus has 12 ink, so if he draws a Malicious Mean and Scary off the top, he's able to wipe the board over the course of the next 3 to 4 turns. Though of course he has to contend with Sky's Basil, which will make him discard. Fungus kickstarts his turn with a Sail the Azurite Sea. He then plays an Improvise to draw a card, and then he just replays the Philip 9. Over to Sky, he leads with questing with Basil because Fungus is holding a card in his hand, and it's obvious why he didn't ink it. It was a Bend to My Will, which is uninkable and also bad to play on this board. Sky then quests out with his characters. He also did play, I believe, a Donald Duck earlier in the turn, which I missed, and then passes the turn back over to Fungus. Threatening, well, not exactly lethal, but lethal soon. Fungus, he has the easiest turn he has to play all game. Just play a Prince Philip 3 and quest with his Prince Philip 9 because with the 2 things on board, that puts him into lethal range the following turn. Importantly, Sky needs a way to answer this Prince Philip 9. It's evasive, none of his characters can touch it. Thankfully, he gets to draw 2 cards. He leads off his turn with an Improvise, quests with Basil, forcing Fungus to discard the last card in his hand, a Vision of the Future. And goodness gracious, he does have an answer to the Prince Philip 9, giving it reckless and unable to quest on Fungus's turn, which means Fungus cannot go for the win, and with Sky's whiteboard, he's able to go for the win first. It's quite apt that John Silver's kind of the card that wins Sky the game here. It's a card that if you've been paying attention all game, both players ink it all the time. It's honestly not very strong in this matchup. It's basically just a 5/5 that costs 6, which is not a great rate, but right here, it's exactly what's good enough to help Sky win the game over Fungus. And with that, Fungus scoops up his cards, and now we are going on to a Game 5 after that really long and intense back and forth Game 4. What a series. Oh. Are you tired? I'm tired. It's been 4 long games and I have to edit these videos. But it's okay. Energy up. Game 5, last one, and we can all go home. Alright, here we go. Game 5 for all of the money, and Fungus is going first, and I want to point out his altar here. He does such a gangster move. He doesn't have turn 2 ramp, but he keeps Clarabelle 1 and Clarabelle 7 and draws 5 cards. Baseline common play here is if you don't have turn 2 ramp, you throw 7, but he decides to take a risk. It could be that he knows the math behind the percentages of him winning the game with ramp and without Clarabelle, and so this is actually just objectively the correct play in the mirror, but either way, I respect it. This is awesome. I'm gonna give you an instant replay to see how fast he does it too. Look at his hand, picks out the 2 Clarabelles, puts them aside, bam! Draw 5, baby, no hesitation. As for Sky, he keeps some number of cards, so we know he probably has turn 2 ramp and he has a plan for how his early progression is going to play out. So turn 1, here we go. Fungus inks an MMS and plays a Clarabelle 1. Sky inks Philip 3, plays a Develop and passes. Fungus's turn 2, he inks a Clarabelle 1, plays a Sail the Azurite Sea. And Snap inks Clarabelle 7. And he spends the ink to play a Develop Your Brain. Inking a Clarabelle 7 there clearly shows he has another one in hand, so Sky knows it's definitely coming. On Sky's turn 2, he inks a John Silver, plays a Tipo, ramping him up to 3 ink after he eventually decides what to put under with the Tipo. Fungus's turn 3, he inks a John Silver and plays a Donald Duck. He's all set up for that You're Welcome and Clarabelle shift, baby. And on Sky's turn, he makes a very heads-up play. So he does have the Cinderella in hand here, I checked. And the most logical play would be to ink a card and play the Cinderella. But he knows that if he does that, he's going to get his Cinderella, You're Welcome back to his hand and a Clarabelle shift in, which will completely restock Fungus's hand. So instead, he inks a Prince Philip 9, and he plays double Clarabelle 1. So what this achieves is that once Fungus shifts in Clarabelle, sings You're Welcome on one of the Clarabelles, then he still has at least the other Clarabelle 1 that he can shift his Clarabelle onto to sing You're Welcome back on Fungus's Clarabelle. So the whole exchange ends with him being up on Clarabelles. Is that definitely better than just taking the hit and playing Cinderella but getting the extra ink? I'm not sure. I think if the card that he was going to play is You're Welcome, it's worth it, but if it's Mother Knows Best, probably not. Anyway, Fungus does exactly what we discussed. He shifts in the Clarabelle, inking a Prince Philip 3, sings You're Welcome with his Clarabelle to take out one of the Clarabelle 1s, and after some thought uses his Donald Duck to challenge the Tipo, because why not? It's worth noting that doing it this way in terms of the challenge and the singing is better than doing the other way around with Clarabelle doing the challenging, because if Clarabelle takes the 1 damage, then when Sky shifts in his Clarabelle can challenge Fungus's Clarabelle, removing it but still keeping his around. So, very minor thing for you to keep in mind. Maybe not minor, maybe most of you know it, but just worth flagging anyway. After stocking up his hand, Fungus passes his turn, and on Sky's turn, he inks a Prince Philip 9, worth noting his second one, shifts in the Clarabelle and sings the You're Welcome on Fungus's Clarabelle as earlier forecasted. And of course, Sky draws a bunch of cards at the end of his turn and passes over to Fungus. On Fungus's turn, he inks a Develop Your Brain, plays 2 Prince Philip 3s, and sings You're Welcome with his Donald Duck onto Sky's Clarabelle, which is really not ideal, but hey, if that's what you gotta do, that's what you gotta do. So now on Sky's turn, he has no board. What he needs to do is to ink up and start playing 4 drops that are able to sing his songs to go with the Bend to My Will that I believe is in his hand, and hope that Fungus doesn't have the response. So he starts with a Sail the Azurite Sea, he inks twice, and he plays a Cinderella to net himself yet another ink. He spends his last ink to play a Clarabelle 1, threatening a Clarabelle shift on the following turn. And of course he gets 1 more ink off of the Cinderella trigger. Back to Fungus, he has a very simple turn. He inks a card, the John Silver, exerts 7 and plays his Clarabelle 7 and starts questing out with his characters. His decision to quest out here is fairly aggressive, seeing as the Donald Duck is what allows him to draw additional cards, and the Prince Philips are what enable a Prince Philip MMS shift line, but he smells a MMS combo on the horizon. I think Sky has enough ink to do it next turn, so why not just quest out, take the 6th law now, and see where we end up. He refills his hand off of his own Clarabelle anyway. Back over to Sky, he inks a Clarabelle 7, sings a You're Welcome on Fungus's Clarabelle with his Cinderella, and then spends the remaining 7 to play, well, maybe not. And after a jump cut, maybe yes, he spends 7 to play Bend to My Will to force Fungus to discard his entire hand, which wasn't that fantastic. Actually, never mind. It was super fantastic. He has the Prince Philip shift line in hand, and once again, Fungus's back is against the wall. On the upside, compared to the previous games, he has a far wider board here, and because of Sky's decision to sing with the Cinderella, it then means that Fungus is able to definitely go up to 6 law next turn. That puts him on 13 law, which is like, a 2 or 3 turn clock in total, so he's able to put on law pressure this game because of the double Prince Philips. The Donald Duck also doesn't hurt because it lets him draw 2 cards to put on more pressure and do more things on his turn. So actually, yeah, thinking about it, he basically has the perfect setup to combat getting Bend to My Will, which is great for him. On Fungus's turn, after a long think, he inks a Prince Philip 3 and plays a Basil, eventually deciding to bounce the Cinderella. The long think there was probably to decide whether or not to ink the Prince Philip 3 because it is a 2-law threat that he can play that also has ward, but I think he knows Sky is probably holding a Clarabelle in his hand, so he doesn't want to hold any number of cards in his hand to allow Sky to draw even 1 more card. He wants him to play off the top of his deck the same way that Fungus is playing off the top of his deck. Also, since presumably he's going to be drawing 2 cards next turn off of his Donald Duck as well, holding on to a 3-drop kinda doesn't fit on the curve. You want to be slamming 7 drops every turn. That's the ideal thing, or maybe John Silver, so makes sense to ink Prince Philip 3 there. So on Sky's turn, he makes a pretty interesting play. What he's going to do is he's going to use his Clarabelle 1 to challenge into a Prince Philip 3, inks a Clarabelle 7, and then spends 9 ink to play Prince Philip 9, removing the Donald Duck and the damage Prince Philip 3, and spending his last ink to play a Clarabelle 1. What this play tells me is he probably has a second Prince Philip 9 in his hand, because that's why he played this Clarabelle 1, to be able to damage something without needing to spend a card or the ink or the singing on Malicious, Mean and Scary, so he can pound on the Law Pressure as fast as he can with his Prince Philip 9. It does look a little bit spewy, seeing as he inked the Clarabelle 7, which he could have shifted onto his Clarabelle there to take out one of the questers. But if he has 2 Philips, then it makes perfect sense, and more importantly, he might be setting up a character that can't be harassed by Fungus's characters to be able to sing a song next turn, so maybe he has the MMS as well. On Fungus's turn, he really needs to draw something good, and he draws a Tipo. Unfortunate. He quests out with his characters, bringing his law to 17. So he is presenting lethal next turn, and it's not trivial for Sky to deal with it because currently his board is not set up to deal with it. But Sky, as he's just shown, has like 3,600 cards in his hand. One of them is going to be discarded to the Basil, so it's likely he's able to find a good response. What Fungus really wanted to draw there was Prince Philip 3, but he didn't, so what can you do? From the Basil discard, Sky discards a Donald Duck. Not really relevant card at this point, because Sky's not really going to play it to give Fungus a chance to draw more critters that are able to quest. On Sky's turn, he inks another Clarabelle 7. He uses his Prince Philip to take out Fungus's Prince Philip, and then he puts a damage onto the Basil with the Clarabelle 7, and I imagine here he's going to be playing a second Prince Philip 9, which he does. Or maybe not. Come on, buddy. I think with this, you're kind of pot committed. You gotta just do it. He's counting his ink. He's counting his ink. Does he do it? Well, viewer, you're getting the full experience of watching this live. I'm not watching this live, but I did watch it, the whole thing beforehand, before recording this video. And this is how a lot of Sky's turns play out. So we're just gonna sit here. You can feel free to fast forward, honestly. I'm not pausing it, I'm committing to this bit. We're getting this video to an hour. Okay, he plays the Prince Philip 9, removing the Basil. And that, on this turn, I can definitely say is spewy, because he inked 2 Clarabelle 7s, he's played 3 Clarabelle 1s. On that exact turn, he could have shifted in that Clarabelle onto his Clarabelle to take out one of the characters without needing to play the Prince Philip there. He could have saved it for an MMS combo on a later turn. I understand he's trying to put on Law Pressure as fast as he can, but I don't think this is the right way to go about it. You kind of got to conserve your resources because you need to be able to take out ready characters eventually, especially if Fungus is able to hit his 4th Prince Philip 3. Anyway, he played a Vision of the Future, picking a card. He took a Vision of the Future, now he's playing the second one. From there, he takes a Develop Your Brain. Man, he really wants that Prince Philip 3, huh? He puts a card into his hand, but because he doesn't have any more ink, he's forced to pass the turn. He quests with his Tipo here, getting him to 18, so Prince Philip 3 next turn probably does it. We shall see. Alright, name of the game here now for Sky. Put as much Law Pressure on the board as you can while setting up things that can take out ready characters. So he starts off with an Improvise to draw a card, see what he hits. He plays a Donald 4, which really shows weakness because that's not something you want to play into an opponent that has 18 Law. So it probably means he doesn't have another MMS combo in hand. He inks a You're Welcome even though he doesn't have the goods in his hand probably, and he plays a Basil. And then after an extremely long think, he decides to bounce the Tipo back into hand even though he can challenge it this turn. So if Fungus plays 2 things next turn, he has 2 characters that are unexerted that now Sky has to deal with, and he probably doesn't have the stuff in his hand. And he also inked the You're Welcome, which is one of the ways that he can draw more cards in his deck by You're Welcoming one of his own characters like the Clarabelle. I don't know, this turn seemed like it was pretty poorly played. And what does Fungus do? He just plays 3 things. Alright Sky, look at it, deal with it. So Sky's on 8 Law and he has 11 Law on board. So if he draws one of his 2, I think, remaining Clarabelle 7s and shifts into it, he's able to win the game on the spot. Is that what he's been playing for? So he leads with a develop your brain to try and find the Clarabelle 7, I imagine, because I don't think anything else can bail him out this turn. He does have cards in his hand that he's holding, so maybe it's an MMS and he's trying to look for a Prince Philip to shift up, because that would also work to basically end the game on the spot. But unfortunately, he doesn't manage to find the juice. He can't find a bounce, can't find a John Silver. He only has a Mother Knows Best, a single copy to return the Cinderella to hand. And the remaining 2 cards in his hand are his own Cinderella and the Prince Philip 3, neither of which are able to interact with Fungus's 2 unexerted characters that are able to quest for the win on the following turn. And there we have it, Fungus is the winner of DLC Richmond. At the end of the game there, I feel like there were several decisions Skies made which, like inking the You're Welcome, even though he probably didn't have the juice in his hand, he needed to draw cards. The Basil bouncing the Tipo there also seemed probably kind of bad. I don't know, it's very hard to say for certain. I looked through this clip many times across the last few turns to try and make out exactly what his hand is. It wasn't very clear on camera, so I don't want to criticize too harshly because maybe he drew the cards in a specific order that meant that those were the only plays that he can make. And even if that's not the case, look, I'm watching these games, I'm tired. I'm sure him playing them, he's really tired as well. I think Fungus mentioned in some exit interviews that they were both talking about how completely exhausted they were. This stream that I'm watching now, this video, is 2.5 hours long, so you can imagine how exhausting that must be. And this is on day 2 after they've played 2 full days of Lorcana already. So congrats to both of them for getting here. Well played regardless, and congrats to Fungus for winning DLC Richmond. Look at the casters, they look exhausted as well. Alright, that's it, we're done. As far as overall learning points are concerned, I think you can tell from the games it mostly comes down to early sequencing and playing around what are the best possible lines your opponent can have. Ramping where it makes sense to ramp based on your hand and eating a You're Welcome and a Cinderella. Setting up Prince Philip 3 to threaten the combo on the following turn should your opponent do something good, stopping your opponent from singing songs. That's how this matchup tends to play, and it tends to snowball from turn 5 onwards. Later turn decisions tend to be much easier, with the exception of game 5 at the end. But anyway, thank you for making it this far. If you've made it this far, hope you enjoyed it, hope you learned something. I think what other YouTubers do is they like to tell a certain catchphrase that they want people to comment at the end of the videos to signal that they made it to the end. I can't think of anything, and I think that's quite stupid, and in any event, most of you are never going to see this because I have the statistics, I have the receipts. Fellas, that's the word I meant to say. Alright, that's it. It's 4:11 AM. I'm completely exhausted. See you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.